Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Dandelion Dynasty Book 4, Speaking Bones, Chapters 50, 51, and 52, Judgment, Ancestral Voices, and A Tempest of Gold. In these chapters, Gia does a few pretty unexpected things. And while I don't know how I feel about her, I gotta admit I respect her. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Kyle for commissioning this episode. Thank you very much, Kyle. Truly, this series has been a wild ride. Kyle is here in the chat with me, as he usually is. Kyle tends to come when he can. Y'all, this section, I am really curious. How many of you saw this coming? Because I really didn't think Gia was going to be able to follow things up in such a way that it would seem like she actually stuck by the ideals she had been preaching. And I fully thought by the time I reached the end of this, I would have also reached the end of my patience with her, which I had come very close to doing. And I think I also expected that I was going to be like watching her descent into madness, you know, like basically like that she was going to be so desperate to cling to her power and her pretense, I suppose is really the word, of doing this for the good of the people. But she would be laid bare, and it would be extremely obvious that that wasn't actually what her priority was at all. Like, right? And I sort of realize, looking back at what my expectation was in that regard, I was looking at this in a real sort of stereotype kind of way. That she was going to go the way of so many characters who pretend that they have the good of the realm and its people at heart. And really, that's not it. That's what they say. But it got turned on its head a little bit. She has been proven to actually mean what she says in a way that I should have known she did by the way that she was willing to kill her children and how much grief she showed over that. Like, I say willing to kill, and truly that is what it comes down to. She wasn't killing them, but she was willing to put them in a position where she knew their lives were in danger. So whether or not it was explicitly sending them to their deaths, it was as good as. So in that sense, I stand by that. But I just really should have seen. But at the same time, you know, guys, there's always people out there who manage to seem really sorry for all of the crimes they've committed. And they convince you they're sorry. They are really, with their tears and their wails, they really manage to make you think that they have seen the error of their ways. But it turns out that that's just going to last until the next time they do the fucking thing again. And I suppose that I really thought that once push came to shove, she was going to be proved to be a fucking fraud. And I can't help but admire the fact that not only is she not a fraud, but she is willing to ask herself some pretty tough questions and answer them honestly and be like, wait a second, I'm teetering on the edge of becoming the very thing that I am allegedly trying to basically build this system as proof against. Why don't we test the system out and see how it works against the thing? And if there's anything that wins me over despite myself, even in the most like shitty of people, even in people who have done really terrible things, it's a sense of self-awareness. I just am a sucker for it. I always have been. And, you know, there's a really like delicate balance, because you can have the self-awareness thing of like a shitty guy you're dating who's like, well, I told you I was an asshole, so you can't be mad at me that I did shitty stuff. Where it's like, you have the self-awareness to know that you're doing shit you shouldn't, but not enough to be like, maybe I should try and be a better person and hold myself to a certain standard. But it's, you know, like taking it one step further, and she is holding herself to a certain standard. So anyway, let's get started. Chapter 50. She's reading all of the information that was sent out to everybody about everything that she had done. The collection of accusations that was, you know, written with the machinery that was invented to copy books really, really quickly. And she's just detached as she does it. There's no sense of urgency, anger. There's not even a sense of her trying to hide that she's been reading them or that she's seen them. I can't help but laugh, though, you guys. She's like looking these over, and it says petitions from the College of Advocates covered the palace's secretaries' desks like a snowstorm, demanding Empress Gia terminate her regency and give up the seal. Even if the Empress is wholly innocent, she should avoid the appearance of tyranny and yield up power pending a full investigation. And this is when we find out Firo's dead, and she has his corpse, and it's been embalmed, and he's being kept. You guys, I don't think I fully realized how much I was holding on to the hope that Firo was still alive. That devastated me. I'm not even going to try and play. Like, I knew it wouldn't make sense that he was still alive, you know, unless the author trotted out some sort of like Deus Ex Machina at the last second that managed to make everything in retrospect turn a different corner, or that he had some like, what's the word I want? Like he had some sort of final protection against this. I just really thought, I really did. I really thought he was going to make it. And I feel so, on the one hand, bummed out, as if it feels, you know what it feels like, you guys? It feels like Robb Stark all over again. That's what it feels like. That's why I'm so sad. Because Robb Stark was the prototypical hero running in to save the day. His father was killed in a way that felt really unfair, and he's here to avenge that, to rally the North. Everything is like revolving around him. He's winning battles, and at such a young age seems like a real prodigy. And you just think that kind of story that this is one where Robb manages to cement things, and then it just goes so badly. And it is due to betrayal, but it's also due to his own decisions. And not really like fully thinking things through, potentially having been bewitched if you follow certain theories. But with Firo, I would say that he actually made better choices than Robb Stark most of the time. He seemed to grow more from a really impetuous child to somebody who actually cared. And I just wasn't prepared for what it would feel like to know that not only is he dead, but he isn't acknowledged. She has made sure that him and his role in this whole thing has been hidden, so that he isn't getting credit. It's just a mob, even though everyone knows that's not actually true. It's not acknowledged publicly with like by the crown, and so it can be called whatever. It hurts, guys. It really does. I really had grown to like and respect Firo and feel like I had thought I knew where he was going. I had thought that Gia like had him wrong. I still do think she had him wrong, but not wrong enough, because he walked right into all of the traps she set just the way she expected. I think her reasoning was faulty because she really believes his judgment that they could make a truce with the Liuku is false. I don't. I know what's happening with the Liuku at this point. And they are tired, and the people who were fundamentalists are mostly dead or crazy from Toliusa sickness. But she doesn't have her finger on that pulse, and she wasn't there. And I don't know if she were, if it would have made a difference, because she's pretty ruthless. And I'm not sure there's anything that Ghost Hunt could have said to convince her that she was serious. So it's really frustrating, because while I think Gia was wrong about Firo, there is nothing about how it all went down that makes it look like she was wrong. She is going to go on thinking she did the right thing, and I don't think she did. And really, the question is, even if she were right, did that make what she did worth it? You know, like, that's another question. So this is the part that made me laugh. Some of the more timid officials, terrified of incurring Gia's wrath, had sent her the mysterious boxes of books left at their residences. In the groveling notes accompanying the materials, they took pains to point out that they had not broken the seals on the boxes, and therefore had not read them. Whatever lies the enemies of the Empress try to spread, they will fall on deaf ears. You're the sovereign of Dara, and your word is law. She had prepared a list of the names of these favor-currying officials that she would send to Kogoyelu when this was over. Termites could not be allowed to nest comfortably in the incorruptible edifice that was the machinery of state of Dara. I could not stop giggling to myself. These guys really thought... They thought they knew who they were dealing with. And, like, truthfully, when you look at the Dyren Finns, why wouldn't you think that? The Dyren Finns is this group of unquestioning, unswerving loyalty, willing to lay down their lives, do anything they are told without asking anything in return anymore. As far as they are concerned, simply being in her employ is their thanks and their explanation. So it's not like Gia hasn't made it look like she really values unquestioning loyalty. To a degree, they're handling it this way is her own fault. But I can understand being like, oh, really? You're being provided with proof that I'm a piece of shit and you're just going to ignore it? Yeah, no, that's not going to... Like, I can't help but respect that. I can't help but respect it. Kyle says, I'm so sorry you got all caught up on where Firo was. I really did, Kyle. Oh my God. It was so sad. I will say that I've gone back and forth a lot during this book, feeling frustrated with the story arc and like the amount of time taken on certain things. But I feel like these 3 chapters were really well paced and like very satisfying, you know? I felt like it was a little bit of a return to form of the way this series has operated usually. So she goes to sleep and she has a dream. Eventually within the dream, she realizes that if she's dreaming about Timu as well as Firo, then Timu is dead. Which is kind of remarkable that she takes it as such a given that her dreams are always about the dead, that if somebody turns up in one, it's not that she just, like, you know, did a different thing for her dream this time. It's just that, no, the actual exterior world as we understand it has changed, which I can't imagine having that much faith in anything, that I'm just like, oh yeah, obviously because I'm dreaming this, it means that a person's life is over. But she immediately takes it that way, and we know that she's right, you know? So I'm not trying to clown on her for it. It's just kind of funny. But she is watching Timu and Firo playing, and I'm not sure if this is supposed to be taken as like, this is the way, this is almost like a replay of something that historically happened, or if it's just her mind interpreting a conversation that could have happened between the two of them. I am personally sort of taking it as a replay of something that historically had happened because of magic. Like, I don't have an explanation for why this, you know what I mean? Just that somehow her mind is connecting with a real thing. And I am almost depressed at the suggestion that they all share rulership coming only at this point. I don't remember if this was ever brought up as an option before. But you guys, it's giving Narnia and like the Pevensey children, the kings and queens. There were 4 of them. Why the fuck couldn't we have just have all, if you're relying on a system, you don't need a single figurehead. A family would work. I would be, to be clear, 100% behind this. They do each bring something decidedly different to the table that balances the others. And it really bums me out that this option is like only brought up in a dream after many of them are dead and this is no longer even on the table. And that it's treated as like a complete non-option, like dismissed so totally as, of course we can't do it that way. Why not? I'm genuinely asking. Go ahead. Do it that way. Nobody can tell you shit. You run shit. Go ahead. Oh, it's so sad, you guys. I really feel the loss of these 2 boys keenly. Timu's like a whole life and the way he was betrayed and his death, it's so unfair. Like, that's what it comes down to so much of the time for me with so many stories, not just fiction, is the way that people are forced to live these like difficult lives and then die, and that's it. And there's no retribution and there's no justice and there's no satisfaction or closure. It's just over. Oh God. Kyle's taken off and says that it was not mentioned, this option, anytime earlier. Sorry to see you go, Kyle, but thanks for coming for a little bit. So this, you know, this whole thing with the 2 of them and the way that they are interacting, he's like playing really hard, batting his sword at a bush, but he hurts a bird and gets so upset over hurting this precious little bird. It was adorable. And eventually we come to this spot where the gods turn up in her dream and are looking down on her and judging her. And the faces of the gods begin to sort of metamorphose into the faces of the various people that she has taken advantage of and killed. And she is really defensive at first. Just, like, I don't know, defensive doesn't even feel like the right word. I guess she's more defensive later than she is initially, because the way she acts at first is penitent. Just really, I did something hideous and I wish I could take it back. I'm so sorry. And then as this like kind of montage, I don't really know the right word to use here, but I'm going to say montage. As it continues, she starts to get more and more angry. And she finally turns and yells at the gods, which I have got to say is a choice. I said I respected her, and I will say it again. You turn and just yell in the gods' faces, who the fuck do you think you are to judge what I am doing? You don't have to live. You don't have to experience this brief period of agony on the planet with all its heartaches, so you don't get to say shit to me. I was like, oh, she's right. Oh my God. She is so right. Like, granted, you could say that and to justify anything, but I really like the entire vibe where this turns a corner and she's basically like, I am done apologizing and groveling. You are judging me after you sat by and let these rapes and tortures and murders take place, and you did fuck all to help. And I am doing some pretty awful things in service of helping make a permanent difference. And you could never step in, help at all. Now, I will say, they did step in. I will say that it's not something that she's necessarily seen or been aware of, but we know that the gods have more than once interceded in events, not necessarily outright, but they have given information or inspiration, or in the case of, oh my God, I can't remember her name, who was working with Thera. She saved Thera's life. So I understand where Gia is coming from. And I honestly mostly agree with her. But she isn't working with all of the information there. So, take that as you will. I really loved this. Her groveling and crying. I thought we were leading up to a point where she just decided that, like, maybe she should end her own life. Maybe she had made a mistake. I don't know if I would have wanted that or not. I think not. I don't know. But anyway, so this whole thing ends with her waking up and realizing, what about a tyrant who threatens the very system of power by standing outside it, who arrogates to herself a deadly force bound only by personal loyalty? What about me? And then we get the scene where she poisons all of the Dairon Fins. I am not going to go through that. Suffice to say that it is agonizing. You guys, that was so so hard to read. I knew, of course, what was coming. Like, there's no way that you read that last section and you don't know where it's going, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't make it any easier. It's worse, if anything. All of these people love her. And in the end, the one person who is aware of what is happening, who understands that they are being killed, forgives her and accepts it as simply the way that it works. If you are somebody who, like, has decided to follow somebody else, that you agree to be at their, to like live at their whim. And her last word is, "It doesn't hurt, Mother." Okay. I'm sorry. That was hard. Oh my God. Mean-spirited. I mean, you know, I wasn't ready for how emotional this whole section was going to be, frankly. It was just a bit of, after so many like recording episodes in a row where I felt like we were losing steam a little bit, where it felt like maybe the author had started to, I don't know if wander is exactly fair. That's not really the word I mean. Stray, I guess. I just wasn't prepared for this kind of like gut punch emotional. And I don't think if you told me that she kills all of her Dyrenfins that I would have expected that to bother me so much. Just basics. I think that for me, the Dyrenfins were not, I hadn't grown to love them. I understood where they were coming from, as much as one can. So I don't know. I just really, you guys, I know I keep saying this and I'm sorry. So this is when we go to Diana briefly, who is coming to the mainland in order to talk with not Gia. They refuse to speak to the regent. They want somebody of the family, even though she was married and she does not count, apparently. And the whole, like, next scene with Gia, I'm going to jump over Ancestral Voices, which is 51, and come back to it because I want to, like, wrap with what's going on with Gia first. 52, A Tempest of Gold, is when Gia announces formal court. And basically, what Gia is trying to do here is create a situation in which everybody finally has the balls to turn their backs on her and do the really seemingly dangerous, we know it's not because this is what she wants, but do the seemingly dangerous thing and disavow her as the ruler. And so she has this, like, you know, she calls in absolutely everybody who is anybody, and has a moment where she puts Kogoyelu especially on the spot and is like, do you have anything to say? And I like that she pushes him the way that she does, because it seems like she is very aware of the fact that Kogoyelu isn't out here looking for trouble. If she doesn't push him, he's just going to let it slide. Like, he isn't interested in creating a problem. But if she pushes and pushes, he'll eventually feel like he has to set an example and do the right thing. So she pushes and pushes, and he finally like basically resigns his post and is just like, yeah, well, I'm sorry, I don't work for you anymore. Mad respect. That is a really bold stance. I am impressed. I just am. Like, the whole way that this goes, she is on the edge of her seat, not because she's worried that they are going to turn against her, but that she isn't sure they're going to have the balls to do it. She is trying, really, this is a test of her own system. She is trying to prove that if the system works as it's intended to, it's self-cleaning. That there's no way for somebody to get away with the shit that she has, because they'll be called on it. They will be called to the carpet and kicked out. That it isn't about personal loyalty, that it isn't about somebody occupying a position that is untouchable. But the fact that she is still sitting there on the throne does make it feel a little bit like it, you know, like maybe she could get away with it and they wouldn't do anything. Now, I really am not sure if I think this is a victory or not. Because eventually Kogoyelu does indeed say, I'm resigning my position, essentially. But she has to push him in a way that I don't know if anybody but her wanting the particular outcome that she eventually gets would have done. That's the part that I keep coming back to, is that this looks like it's functioning the way that she wants, but it's taking her intervention and sort of manipulation based on understanding the personality. And I'm not fucking convinced that this is actually them having the guts to uphold the system. It, like, does that count if they had to be goaded into it by her? Does that even really count? I'm genuinely asking, because I can't decide. Part of me feels like it doesn't, you know? And another part of me feels like, does it matter that much? You know, maybe it's just the first step and it's setting a precedent that will later make it easier for them to, I don't know. But she is satisfied with it. It takes a while, and it's really funny how much she has to push. Like, she keeps on yelling for Aya to arrest Kogoyelu, and Aya genuinely, God bless her, does not seem to know what to do. I really felt for her, because she's like clearly going, wait, what do I do? And eventually, when it turns the corner and it seems like there's really critical mass of the number of people who are turning their backs on Gia, she does say, you know, I'm going to protect all of these people. And instead of arresting them, she's like, form a line around the Lords of Dara. Nobody's going to harm them. But again, like, how much does that really count if you had to be nudged and nudged and nudged? Again, maybe it's setting a precedent. I might be just kind of like poo-pooing something unfairly. It may just be about the understanding that this is the way the system works when they have never functioned within a system like the one Gia is attempting to set up yet. So they don't understand the power that they wield, and she's trying to simply get them to exercise that so they have a fuller grasp. I choose to believe that simply because I really liked the insistence Gia had on like seeing it through to the very, very end. And there's just, I love, here it says, no harm will come to them. Later, Puma Yemu would tell everyone how much the imperial princess in that moment resembled her mother, the peerless Ginmazoti. And I want also to believe that, but I can't help but think it's just because Puma Yemu does not like Gia and is willing to give a thumbs up to anybody who sort of spat in her face. And Ginmazoti has so much, she always had this like ironclad ethics that was immovable. And her daughter is so wishy-washy that it's really hard for me to take seriously any comparisons between the two, which isn't fair of me. You know, like, she's a kid. I really should give her a little bit more grace, but it's hard because knowing who Ginmazoti was, she has big shoes to fill and she knows that, but I know that too. I want to be kinder to her, and I appreciate Gia giving her the chance, because that's really what she's doing here. Gia is stepping back and giving Aya the opportunity to embody her mother, and in a much more substantial and genuine way than in like the posturing that Aya had been doing in other chapters. So to that degree, I'm actually kind of a fan of how this went. And this is when she tells all of them that Firo is dead. And they are all just like, God damn it, because they weren't sure. Now they know. They're talking about summoning Prince Gimoto after she like runs out of the hall. Because they have to replace her, obviously, since she is no longer going to be the regent. And I love this. They start to talk about him because she is the one that, the Empress has always asked him to come to court. Gori-Ruthi's voice trailed off. As much as he believed in the importance of the traditional rules of succession, he found it hard to advocate for Gimoto with any measure of conviction. Besides, after what had just occurred, Gia's endorsement had no persuasive power, which was like the particular thing that got me a little bit. Hadn't occurred to me really, but just like, yeah, being like, well, she's the one, and like, she's not really the one that you want to be quoting right now, I don't think. And everybody was like, she was even glad that Gimoto wasn't there, because she knew that he was going to be such a cheerleader for her that he would probably wear down the will of the others to take a stand against her. He sounds like a real shit. I feel like I've gotten a good sense of him from everybody talking about him, even though we haven't really seen very much of him. I don't know if we've actually seen him at all. I feel like we haven't, but we may have gotten a brief glimpse. Doesn't matter though. I really feel like I know who he is. I get it, So eventually they decide that first they're going to free Zomi Kidosu. And Kogoyelu says she will confirm and attest the precedent has been set. And they're just like, oh shit. What about Thera's sister, Farah? Y'all, I hadn't even considered Farah as an option really. And I will tell you, it's because she doesn't seem to want the job. I think that's all it is that she hasn't shown any interest. And to me, when you step back and look at it, that's actually a mark in her favor. Somebody who's genuinely like, I'm good. I don't need power. It seems hard. I can't help but be like, correct. That is the way to live. Like, that's a proof in itself that somebody is worthy of power, because they recognize what a fucking awful thing this kind of job probably is. But otherwise, I don't remember, correct me, anybody listening, if you know, I don't remember a single time that I mentioned her as a future ruler of Dara. Never even considered it. So anyway, yeah, this, the direction that this is going in, I'm really interested to see what her reaction is for when they come to her and are like, hey, you're going to be queen now. Cool. Like, she has just really not shown any particular, do I want to say aptitude? I feel like I do. And I think that's kind of harsh, but I'm going to go with it. I don't know about how she rules people. We have seen the way that she behaves in a general sense. And I think that she is a good person with creative thinking and is like, I don't think that necessarily she would be a bad leader, but I don't really know enough about the way she is when in charge. She has seemed very much a peer with everybody that she has worked with in this story so far. So I don't know, like, everybody chime in with what you felt at this point in the story, because I'm really, really curious whether or not you all had been predicting the direction this all was going in and how you felt about her turning out to be the nominee, so to speak. I don't know if it was as much of a shock to anybody else, or if I was just being weirdly short-sighted about it. Anyway, okay. So let's back up now and go into chapter 51, Ancestral Voices. And this is really interesting. So Thera is like, hey, folks, we have figured out how to play these recordings, so to speak, the last breaths. And we're interested in going into the Barrows and finding out the, last words of Kiki Savo and Afir. And she's worried when she proposes this, understandably, because going into the Barrows has been sort of a taboo. And not sort of, a massive taboo. And she doesn't know whether or not they're going to see the mere proposition of this as evidence that she isn't one of them. Which, I understand that concern. And I think maybe if this had happened more, earlier on, it would have gone that way. But now it's looking like maybe we are in safer territory. She has proven herself enough. Maybe not enough for some of the real hardliners out there, but it seems maybe enough to get by with, proposing, they go with it, and proposing a taboo and having them go along. That's pretty impressive, actually, when you stop back and think about it. So good for her. And they wind up getting it and listening to I think it's Kiki Savos that they're listening to. And they listen, but I think it's Sata Ari, and she finally comes up for air after really focusing and just says, I cannot understand what he's saying. And they realize that the language has evolved so much that it's essentially like they're learning a new language now. So the way that they decide to do this, and I think this is so neat, is they interview, because they have such a variety of people that are thrust together in this place. And because of how isolated they were from one another, they actually have extremely different versions of the same language. And some of them are continuing to use certain words that others have left behind and vice versa. So what they do is they gather them all and interview them all and then overlap the findings with all of the other findings to see how many things are consistent that they can then like extrapolate, okay, here's the fundamental meaning. And I really have to assume that this is a method that has been used before. It feels like it's the only way to go, probably, depending on what it is you're trying to decipher. And I love this. Like, it just feels like it would be not satisfying only at the end when you get the answers, but satisfying as you're doing it to like discover what has survived with whom and try and understand why. All of this information, like, it's just, especially now that they have a way of managing to preserve it, it's just really interesting. So they end up with the overall story of Kiki Savo and Afir. And I have to mention, you guys, I think this is not the first time that I have discovered this. But evidently, Afir is a woman. I don't know why I didn't know that. I don't know why I assumed. I could have sworn they were described as brothers. I could have sworn. And I apparently was either completely wrong or the word that was used really meant siblings. And I jumped to brothers from siblings, which it may very well be, because I still have a tendency to like see male as the default and white as the default, just like I was bred to think, you know. I haven't risen above that entirely. So maybe that's all it is. But yeah, you guys, I just really had a moment of like, because it says, you know, people stay with Afir and her people, blank, blank, blank. And I was like, hold up. What? Oh, okay. Now, what it turns out happened was that things had been lush and fertile and beautiful. They were able to farm and fish. Everything about the way that they lived originally mirrors the way that they live in Dara, which now the Liuku people look down their noses at, right? Which I think most of us could have seen that coming, because that's just how a lot of times shit works out. And then eventually there are some pretty dramatic, like climate changes. And it's not really, I don't know if it's supposed to simply be that this happened because of a shift in the planet itself. Like if there was anything that I was meant to infer about the cause, I don't think so. It seems like it's a spontaneous, natural event. And I am wondering, like, how long ago that this might have happened and how often that sort of thing occurs in this universe. It doesn't matter. But if they wind up with like arid, dry land where only scrub seems to survive, and they can't farm the way that they used to, the water begins to dry up, and more the bodies of water shrink, the more salty they become, so that they aren't able to drink from them anymore. Like, there's just a lot about the way they used to live has been undone. And they don't seem to want to adapt. And so that's really the crux of this, like, conflict between Kikisavo and Ophir, is that Kikisavo is like, that's it. If we, like, if our world has changed this much, we have got to completely adapt to a new world and stop hanging on to things that don't apply anymore. The way that it used to be is irrelevant. Who cares that we used to do it XYZ sort of way? And that's not the kind of land we're working with. That's not the water supply that we have anymore. We've got to completely set all of that aside. And Ophir is like, so what? You have absolutely no respect for the, like, generations and generations of people over hundreds of years that created the ways in which we used to live, the traditions and the perfections to our systems and things like that. Doesn't matter to you. These people worked on perfecting it all for our benefit, and then we're just going to throw it away? And Kikisavo's like, yeah, because it doesn't apply anymore. I've got to say, I really understand Kikisavo's point here. But what ends up happening is it causes a schism. Kikisavo goes one way, Ophir goes another. They each have their followers. And Kikisavo's, like, those people managed to survive pretty well. Better, one would argue, than Ophir's people, who are struggling to keep farming and stuff and none of it's fucking working. And eventually, Kikisavo comes back to Ophir and is like, so, I wanted to tell you that I was right. By completely changing the way that we function in this world, we have survived. We ruthlessly discard people who are infirm or ill, and we follow the herds and migrate with them. You know, all of these things that we have changed how we do them. I was right. This works. However, I also was wrong. Because none of this has any meaning. And it's so utterly divorced from the traditions that came before it. And our people feel that loss and that lack of connection. And so we need to find a way to do both, to preserve what came before and honor that, and also to, like, adapt and just alter the things that we are so attached to, because they do not function in this new world. We've got to find a balance within that. And the balance that they struck was to basically that cache of, like, grain and seed and everything that, oh my God, I forgot his name, that he came upon when he was lost. That was put aside as part of the way to tell the story of the way that things used to be, how everybody used to live, and be there in case the terrain and the water supply changed. So that if there were ever an opportunity for all of them to go back to this way of life, there would be some sort of record, a way in which to do that, and descriptions of how it had been done before. And there's something really heartbreaking to me about setting that up and then it being so lost for so long that it's discovered completely by accident in a way that easily could have gone left, like, and never been seen again. the anxiety, but that's the thing about fucking like a legacy is you don't get control over that. You just have to put things in place and hope that it goes the way you want it to go. But you don't get to like have any say or influence beyond what you have set in place and its static nature after you have died, of being just like a one-dimensional, either something written on a piece of paper with a lawyer or something that you like said in a video. And the folks that are left, it's up to them whether or not they even want to fucking listen to it. Which this is part of the reason why I'm like, I don't want kids. Because there's so many people out there who seem to think that like having children is the way to leave a legacy. And it's like, well, maybe, but you don't have any say over what they do with that legacy, you know? So the like change in the terrain and the climate and everything, it changed back a little bit in the particular area where they find the barrows, and it grows lush in that area again. There's so much grass, there's so much water, like it's just a completely different landscape eventually. But because all of this information has been put in the barrows, buried under it, they'd never find it until now. So let's see, I'm trying to find the spot here. After the inhabitants abandoned the site and adapted to the nomadic way of life, they spread out far across the scrublands until the City of Ghosts was only a forbidden place of semi-coherent legends, which warned the descendants of Afir and Kikisavo never to adopt the farming life again, never to settle. Which is like not exactly what was meant to be taken from, you know, like. And then it says the resentment between those who had chosen to leave with Kikisavo first and those who had chosen to stay with Afir didn't fade with time, but grew. Each tribe believed itself to be the true heir of the greatness of the Barrows. Small differences accumulated and festered until they became irreconcilable. And I couldn't tell whether or not, and I don't think this is it, but there was a point where I was sort of wondering, is the implication that the followers of Afir wound up founding Dara? Or I don't think so, right? Over the centuries, weather patterns shifted again. Heavy rainfall returned to parts of the eastern edge of Ukigonde, and that was why the valleys and the foothills of the World's Edge Mountains and the alluvial plains along the eastern shore of the Sea of Tears had recovered a lush and hospitable climate. Though the ancient site of the Barrows was suitable for farming again, the people of the scrublands didn't return, believing the settlement was itself a taboo act. Though they remembered the fragments of the stories of their ancestors, they had forgotten their true import. So yeah, I don't know, maybe it is supposed to be that the people from Afir like departed, I don't know, became those of Dara. I don't think so. They don't bear any resemblance to each other, like physically speaking, so I don't think that's really it. But interesting thought. So this is when Thera is saying, our ancestors dared to adapt, to change as the land changed around them. They strode away from a dying city and into the endless storm raging across the scrublands. They dared to forget, to remember, to leave behind, to hold on. When one way of life was no longer viable, they carved out a new one. How can we be any less courageous? And I'm assuming she wants to settle here. That's the nature of what, like, we've got fresh water, we've got lush, fertile ground, let's fucking do this. That's what I am assuming she's asking them to do. And for the record, I'm for it. I like this. I mean, I want more for her to go home with everybody and create, like, a beautiful new world, but also just leaving with everybody and making it like it doesn't count as victory unless they're part of Dara is not really fair. It's just, I have difficulty caring that much about what happens north of the Wall of Storms. I'm going to be honest, you guys. I'm not that invested because Dara's where I've been for 5 books. Like, so, not 5 books. I guess really 2.5 books. But yeah, I really respect what she's doing, and I think she's doing the right thing. But I just keep imagining her coming back and how much she's changed and what that could mean for the landscape of Dara politically. And maybe that still will happen. I don't know. Maybe what she's asking is like, do you want to change your way of life and fucking take off and go back through the Wall of Storms? But I don't feel like that's what she's saying. And anyway, if Farah becomes queen and she is empress, I guess it would be, and she marries, what is his name? Oh my God. I always forget his name. Savo. He is of the Scrublands. So that's still a sort of like alliance happening there, you know? The thing is that it's sort of uneven because he grew up in the Scrublands, but then got educated really well about Dara. And she has not been really educated about the Scrublands at all and isn't familiar with their like traditions or anything. So she would have to learn in order for it to really feel like a balanced effort on both their parts. Maybe she'd be okay with that. I don't know. They haven't really talked about that so much. It's always just the two of them looking moon-eyed at each other and loving each other. But anyway, I really do have to wrap this up. I did like these chapters a lot though, and they're very compelling, and they have a lot of implications, and I'm excited to follow them up and find out where we're going. So I'm going to wrap this. Thank you again, Kyle, so much for commissioning this and for coming to hang out for a bit. And thank you also to Ms. T for coming to the chat. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.